Hey, good morning. It's Jillian. Good morning. Good morning. So I want to say that my house smells like a bed and breakfast because I made some bacon. Yummy. And it smells like there's syrup, but I didn't use any syrup. But I like the smell of my house when I make bacon because it does remind me of breakfast cooking in the morning because I don't usually eat breakfast every morning, especially bacon. But when I do, it's fun. So anyways, so um so this is where we go from the micro to the macro. And so you're seeing the evolution of the Dilly Juice protocol going from the very, very infinitesimally small to now a whole global look of how everything is connected and how language and subject matter education and context all play a part in the division, the divide and conquer. And I don't know if it's intentional or if it's a byproduct of the ignorance of people developing curriculums from an imbalanced body, mind, and spirit. So, Jilly Juice is attempting to go from the micro to the macro and to go from a subjective population to now a very objective population because academia has turned out students who are very subjective, very tunneled. And this is why I bumped heads with my mother. I love her dearly, but she's very tied into academia and it's very subjective. And so now that I understand this, I can understand now why there has been always issues because I've always been objective. Even as a child, I've always just tried to be objective. And then everyone's trying to make me subjective. They don't want to give me the whole picture. They only want to give me pieces of the picture and then let me figure out the bigger picture on my own. And I'm like, I want to know everything. I want to be running off into the hills, learning about the world, and not be stuck in this classroom where I'm only learning about this, and this, which am I really going to use this algebra, which I actually have kind of used it a little bit, but not to the extent of what I was being taught. So this is probably why some kids don't do well in school because they're so objective, and then the parents and the system want to get them so narrow and subjective to where they don't see how everything is connected. And this is probably what is driving these kids mad that they can't handle compulsory education because they know that there is a bigger picture out there. But how do you teach a big picture without teaching the smaller picture? Well, you go through bouts of where I went through bouts where I was shitty in school and then I was really, really good. I mean, I got honor roll and honorable mention like in 6th grade, and then things kind of went crazy as I got older because I wanted to see the bigger picture. And I was constantly being told, you got to pick a career, you have to pick a choice, you have to pick this. You either go into college and get like this degree, or you go into food service like McDonald's or get a trade. And I'm like, oh God, I'm in Silicon Valley. You don't get a trade in Silicon Valley. You go get a degree in something at some highfalutin school. So I kind of feel bad for kids nowadays, but then I don't because now they have access to open source, which is the internet and Google. And that testimony or that compliment today, when someone said, I came onto your page wanting to make fun of you, and then everything you're saying can be substantiated in a medical journal. I mean, it's not, they don't connect all the dots, but they give you all the information as if they were separate. Just like when you go and look in the dictionary, the dictionary doesn't make all the connections for you. You look up each word separately as if they were standalone, functional silos, and then nobody is making the connections because it's not. Connections don't make people money. Because once you see the connections, then you're not going to need all the different compartmentalized industries that make money off of people thinking everything is separate. So, yeah. So, anyway, so I figured out that politics, religion, science all are the same thing, just in different contexts, jargon, and then it's body, mind, and spirit is a manifestation of politics, religion, and science. And then they're using the words like adaptation, evolution, and mutation as interchangeably to explain the changes in the environment based upon the context of the subject matter. So when you look at like evolution, well, they'll say like adaptation, evolution, okay? And that would be under science. And then you could say, adaptation, yeah, evolution, what else? I mean, I'll say adaptation and science, and then spirit, or body. Okay, so, and then what else would you say? As far as mutation could be science, or adaptation could be, yeah, or politics could be adaptation too. But you could have science and mutation, and then the science. I gotta write all this down because I'm trying to make all these connections, and it's like I have to write it down. So let's do this. So politics, religion, science, body, mind, spirit, and then adaptation, mutation, and evolution. So evolution and evolution and the body and science. So if you wanted to kind of put those words together based upon the context, so let's say the science community, and then they can all say adaptation, science, and the body. Because the mind would be something like a psychological, it could be science too. But these are like the three things. I mean, politics, religion, science, body, mind, and spirit, adaptation, mutation, evolution. And they're all used interchangeably based upon the context. Context is, which I actually was debating, well, not really debating, but I was trying to get this point across of context, because in landmark education, it's all about context, okay? But they don't break down the words to such an extent to that have people understand context. Because they say life is empty and meaningless. No, life is not empty and meaningless. There is meaning to it, and yes, you apply to it, but words have meaning and they drive realities. Okay, so I was breaking down the words, saying con as in like defraud, text as a written word, and then I put the context as how to drive false realities or something. And then someone in Landmark over there was like, "Oh my God, that's so negative." They deleted the comment, but they're like, "Well, that's very disempowering, right?" And she was trying to break down and tell me what context means, and it's to weave. Context to weave. Oh, so then I put in the comment, oh, what a web we weave, and then you can read out the rest. When you practice to deceive, right? Which is the same thing as con and text. And so, I think I pissed her off because she didn't think that I actually knew that no matter what, no matter how you break down context, whatever context you want to put context in, it's still creating a reality based upon the jargon that fits the different subject matter education. So you have jargon and context in politics, jargon and context in religion, jargon and context in science, and then they're using adaptation, mutation, and evolution interchangeably, and then you have the body, mind, and spirit that brings in the politics, religion, and science, and then how they use adaptation, mutation, evolution. Because you say, yeah, evolution of the body, evolution of the mind, evolution of the spirit, whatever, okay? Hey, Tiffany. So that's what's not going to be in this book coming up in June, but I am writing another book that really brings the macro together, because we just discovered and picked apart the micro with the Jilly Juice world. And so now you have to go from the micro to the macro, and that's how this next, not the book in June 2020, but the next book, which I'm thinking of calling it either, what is it? It's like the evolution or the revolution will be televised, but evolution, or revolutions will be televised, but evolution, or the evolution will not be televised, but revolutions will be. Then I put from evolution to revolution to devolution, or whatever, evolution to revolution, or I could say breaking through the system of subjectivity. So I'm figuring out the title of the book, but I am doing the macro now. I'm looking at racism and why racism is actually a biological thing. It's a biological gut response to people with imbalances, and it happens on both sides. And that's why there's so many black and white issues, right? Because that's the extremes on both ends. You could be a very, non-melanic person who has trouble producing melanin and have imbalances, and you can have high amounts of melanin to where you're also imbalanced as well. So there's a happy medium in between. And then when we have racism, it's because you have a gut reaction to imbalances that you can't really explain, but then the jargon and the nature versus nurture. So nature is how the body responds to, is the body's baser instincts. Nurture is how you rationalize your body's response to nature. And so, yes, so when we rationalize racism and we rationalize why our body has gut reactions to people, places, and things, that's a nurture. When you're teaching people racism, when you're teaching people not to be racist, it's all nurture. Okay. And so it's actually, I also put in there not this book, but the next book, the nature versus nurture, how that relates to politics, religion, and science, and then body, mind, and spirit, and then adaptation, mutation, and evolution. So nature versus nurture. And nurture is the rationalization of biodiversity. And so this is how people are able to convince somebody that the sky is purple when it actually is blue. This is how you convince somebody that you have to take all these different anti-parasites because they're bad because you don't understand your microbiome. That's the whole nurture part of our societies, where you teach people the complete opposite of what actually is true. You teach people that if you have an agenda to shut down someone or take them out, you create lies about them, like they do about Bill Gates. They totally lie about him and what he does. They say that he doesn't care about people's welfare or water or food, or he's only about vaccines. And that's totally not true, because that's a very subjective mentality that people have because they have an agenda. They're coming from their subject matter education and imbalances from their cancer, disease, and chronic illness. And so that's why you're seeing me also evolve. And people say, oh yeah, you sold out to the mainstream. No, I see value in everything. I understand why it all exists. Doesn't mean I subscribe to every single thing in the mainstream, but I understand why it exists. And I give people some of the benefit of the doubt. I even give my stupid naysayers, my naysayers, the benefit of the doubt, because I know they're coming from a point of where they want to save the world in their own way, but they're not very well versed in foundation basic science, because they are taking the lowest hanging fruit out there. They don't do deep research because they've probably never looked at a PubMed, or they found something in PubMed that would substantiate their theory or their thought process that yes, it may be true in this context, but it doesn't mean that it's bad, right, or wrong, or whatever. So yeah, I mean, in some people, salt can cause the blood pressure to go up because they are not drinking enough water, because the antidiuretic hormone is trying to push water and blood through constricted blood vessels because of the person's predispositions and their daily practices. But not everybody gets high blood pressure from eating salt. And high blood pressure isn't necessarily bad. It's the body's way to pump blood and retain water so you don't die from dehydration. But if you have heart issues and lung issues, you might have some issues no matter what. And then you do the J juice with the nutrition, all that stuff, you'll be able to heal. But if somebody is not doing J juice and they're eating salt and they haven't fixed their issues, yeah, of course, salt is an energizing force. It's going to try to keep the body going and not get dehydrated by retaining water. And so, so yes, they may be right in that area. Okay, there's a connection, but it's not because the salt caused it. It's because the salt is now trying to balance and calibrate. And so, yeah, you will find things that will substantiate your perception of something, but it doesn't mean that what you're finding is actually a thing that would harm the body. Maybe in different contexts, it could be construed as that because people don't want to feel pain, but that's only part of the equation. It's not the full equation. And so that's kind of what academia does and what medical system does, is they give you half the equation and people are satisfied with those half equations and the lowest hanging fruit. And then that's where they stop. As soon as their belief system has been confirmed or substantiated in some way, even in just a small text where you only see a part of the equation, that's where they stop learning. Okay. And then that's where they promote half truths. Okay. And so the whole dilly juice says, okay, there's a bigger picture. It's not just subject matter education. There is an objective way you look at how everything works together. And that takes a bit of a little objectivity, sort of, in other areas of your life. But if you're not objective, no matter what, if you've been really trained by the system to be so subjective and so specialized, it'll be a harder time for someone to really peel back the layers of subjectivity to then get to something where they can see the bigger picture. And some people are not very educated at all, but their gurus and their icons are people with credentials because maybe they have an issue where they never got to school or never had a college education. And so they believe people who are in those worlds, and that's the only people they believe in. So they themselves, just in of itself, have created a subjectivity type of lifestyle where they're so tunneled and then they can't get out of that. And I think that is a Jeff Holiday type of mentality, as well as Pathos and Newsweek and BuzzFeed, because they're all, when they've gone to these universities and they are trying to slam pseudoscience based upon their perception of science. They're only looking from a one perspective. They haven't seen all the perspectives because they've been taught only to go down this very narrow path. And I feel bad for them because there could be a bunch of potential possibility for them to I don't know. I mean, who knows what could be. They wouldn't have to be doing what they do to destroy the people or hurt, but that's what makes them money, and that's our society, is where when you slam someone, you hurt somebody, that's what makes money. Because predators and prey, which is another thing I mentioned in my next book, not this book, but the next book, where the predator and prey mentality, looking for the yin and the yang, is also another belief system that is woven, a behavioral belief system that's woven in the fabric of our society, of people who are very subjective, very imbalanced. And so they take on these characteristics as well as accuse others of those characteristics, because that's the only thing they know. They only know how to be a victim, or they only know how to be a predator. So those that slam me all the time talking smack, they've taken on the predator type of mentality and category and persona, as well as a victim. They've taken on both of those personas simultaneously, because remember, those two, predator and prey, share the same characteristics. Okay, so, but that is a baser level instinct. That is an animalistic primeval instinct of people who are not highly evolved. So when you are constantly taking on predator prey type of mentality, that is the lack of evolution, and then that is our subjective population. So you can be highly degreed and highly specialized and still come from a baser instinct. Okay, but then according to Maslow, everyone's self-actualized, because everyone's going to meet every single one of those rungs, because they're alive, they're part of a community, they have some kind of recognition, they've met all of their physiological, emotional, whatever needs, or they wouldn't be here. Okay, so it's so right now I'm kind of just spitting off, because yesterday I was spent from like 8 in the morning all the way to about 8 at night, 9 o'clock at night, reading over my next book. That's going to be after June 2020, because I want to finally now write a book that will cover from the micro to the macro. You have the dilly juice, you understand the micro, and then my next book is cover the macro, and then there's nothing left to be covered, because now we've covered it all. We don't have to go into itemize every single thing that is a political controversy and try to rip it apart. No, there is a reason why people are activists. There is a reasoning why people play discriminatory types of roles. When a child is discriminatory in their food, like, when somebody is like in body, mind, and spirit, they are very, they get a lot of, let's say the parents focus on intellectual, their parents are very academic, and then they're spiritually aware because let's say they're Mormon, or there's some other religion where they're really practicing those religions, but yet they totally ignore the body. And so already there's a discrimination going on. And then of course, with the imbalance of the focus of only on the spirit and the mind, but ignoring the body, now you have a discrimination, and then you start discriminating against food. And then in turn, you discriminate against other people. And so that's how we've created racism in our society, is by how the parents who have not fixed their body, mind, and spirit teach discrimination at a very early age indirectly. And so I'm making that connection, that why we have such racist, intolerant, very phobic people of diversity, because of what is being taught at home. When your kid's a vegan and vegetarian, when your kid is only about their religion, say they're only Mormon, or and they only do academic classes, but they don't take care of their body, and so they're extremely underweight or very obese, you are going to create a very discriminatory child that's going to be a very discriminatory adult, who will then cater to the imbalances of our society, of why then we have to have authority and government. Okay, so racism and discrimination is taught at a very early age at the physiological level. because of parents discriminating against sugar, discriminating against salt, discriminate against foods. Oh, you can't have this processed food. You can't have this meat. You can't have this GMO. I mean, all of the activists out there are practicing discrimination directly and indirectly, and they're teaching it to their children. And then you have these environmental activists who are all vegan and vegetarian or not, but they are allowing their bodies to age and degrade, and yet they're so worried about the environment, and yet they let themselves die and pass away. And they're trying to save the world, and they can't even save themselves. So I'm also bringing that up as far as the hypocrisy of the activists, the environmental activists, the people that practice discrimination in their body, mind, and spirit, in the food supply, in the environment, in politics. And so you see how everything is connected. And then you will realize that you are part of the problem if you practice any kind of discrimination. I don't care what it is, whether it's food, whether it's clothing, whether it's religions, whether it's science, whether it's whatever, politics. If you practice any kind of discrimination in any way, shape, or form, you are part of the problem of intolerance. And that's a tough pill to swallow. Okay? And so that's why I'm breaking down the melanin, and who knows if there is an actual campaign to destroy those that are heavily melanated. But then those that are not very heavily melanated, where they don't make up enough melanin, they're also at risk of not surviving evolution. Okay, so it is a balance in between the two extremes. And so that's what, not this book, but the next book is going to then show from the micro to the macro, and then bringing in politics, religion, and science, and then showing where discrimination actually is taught at home. At the physiological level, when they tell their kids, oh, you can't have that, you can't have this, you got to eat that, you got to eat this. When they don't bring balance into their child's world, and they teach your children that you shouldn't eat meat, and you shouldn't do this, and you shouldn't do that, and which there are certain things you shouldn't do. But when you practice discrimination when it comes to the food, air, food, and water, when it comes to your baser instincts of shelter, food, water, and reproduction, all that stuff, you're teaching your kid discrimination at an early age. And yes, they will be very intolerant as they get older. I already see it in some families that I know. A lot of it happens in California because of the whole health guru fabric that goes on out there, where everyone's doing their diets and they're being vegan and vegetarian, and they're hating the meat people, and they think that they're destroying the environment. And yeah, California breeds so much intolerance and discrimination. If anything, that's probably the worst. And yet they're the ones that cry the loudest that they're a victim of it. And yet they're the ones that perpetrate it. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them that are into these environmental green things have taught intolerance and discrimination, and yet they're the ones that are preaching about how we shouldn't have it, and yet they're the ones that sustain it and perpetuate it. So that's what I'm going to be uncovering in not this book, but the next book. And so that's what I'm working on, because I got to get the macro out, and once this macro is out, then I can just, market the book or do whatever, and I can finally relax. Because I've been really working for the last 4 freaking years, ever since 2016. Okay? I've been working on the Jilly Juice from the micro to the macro, and I'm not done yet, but it's almost done. I'm pretty much almost there. And I've simplified everything down to politics, religion, science, body, mind, and spirit, adaptation, mutation, and evolution, nature versus nurture. And then you have the microbiome and the viruses. And then I'm going to show then also too, how the microbiome and insects and plants, fungus and the messages. Kevin Van Rompuy, which I know I haven't really talked to him because I'm waiting for an email from him of something, but I may not, I don't know. But anyways, but he did mention and tell me about like fungus and messages in the forest and all that, which is really cool. And I did some research and found that there are people that have done research on fungus in the forest and how they are the messengers of the trees. And that's pretty cool, because that's also how yeast in our body work as well. So, there's definitely, there's connections with the plants and the microbiome and chlorophyll and blood and insects as vectors And, vaccines are vectors too. Men are vectors because they have, driving points. Okay. So so once you see the bigger picture, how it all works together, then you won't be discriminatory. And then you'll just learn how to balance it all out. And that's the whole point of Jilly Juice, is not to become from a very narrow discrimination, subjective point of view. It's to become so objective that you don't fight any more wars because there's nothing to fight. There's nothing to fight. But you're looking at people fighting as if there's an enemy in their house and they are their own enemy. Yeah. Some people are their own worst enemy. So anyways, I'm going to do my thing, but you guys just understand how, where I'm going and why I'm going. And my plans for the future is just to get this third book out and then maybe take a relaxation or take a breather, and then let you guys finally see how Jilly Juice works at the micro, and then how it actually could manifest in the future at the macro. So if I, even if this book doesn't get any kind of, notoriety or whatever, not this next book, but the one after that, if it doesn't get any kind of press until 10 or 15 years from now, I'm fine with that. Just laying the groundwork and seeds is all that really needs to happen. And then we as the Jilly Juice crowd will exemplify everything in that third book that will come out sometime this year or next year. Okay? So we have plenty of time. But I wanted to give you what I'm doing, what I'm working on, so you see that there's going to be more evolution going on. And who knows, there could be a fourth book down the road. But at this point, right now, we have 7 billion people who are trying to figure it out. And maybe I get 100 or 200 views on my YouTube videos. Okay, 200 views out of 1,000, 1,900 subscribers. That's not a lot. So that means that there's still, people still need to kind of figure it out and get used to the idea of what I'm putting out there. And then you guys have to exemplify what Jilly Juice is, because maybe the reason why it's not getting out there is because we haven't exactly exemplified it yet, because we haven't been around that long. So anyways, you guys have a good day. Bye.